Trump is using the Department of Justice to target his political enemies. I know because I'm one of them. And so is my guest, California Congressman Robert Garcia. Welcome back to Defending Democracy. I'm Marc Elias. Let's get started. Congressman Garcia, thank you for joining us.
Happy to be here. Thank you.
All right, I have to start with what has to be one of the craziest, crazy in like a terrible way, crazy in the way in which only the Donald Trump world brings us crazy, which is all bad things. But one of the craziest things of this administration, which is a letter that you received from the interim U.S. attorney for the District of Columbia, who seems to be fond of sending out these letters, but you sent one to you about some comments that you made. I think you called Elon Musk a dick, and you got this letter. And I'm just curious, like, what you make of that.
Yeah, totally crazy and really just an overreach of trying to actually intimidate, obviously, of course, and silence Democratic members who are trying to push back actually on Elon Musk and Donald Trump. I mean, look, in a hearing, I essentially was saying that, pointing out the hypocrisy and irony of Republicans, particularly Marjorie Taylor Greene, who chairs the DOJ committee, which is insanity. Just that alone is craziness. She was fond of using pornography in our hearings in the last Congress. I mean, literally showing pornography in the last hearing. And so I decided to bring my own dick pic, as I called it, and I showed a picture of Elon Musk, and that got her and a bunch of Republicans all upset. And then I used a metaphor, literally a metaphor, saying that Democrats need to bring weapons to this bar fight and fight for the American people. Democrats are demanding us. The public is demanding us to actually be tough. And I used that metaphor, and then immediately I got this letter from Ed Martin saying that, what if I wanted to clarify my remarks, that if I was being somehow threatening to Elon Musk. And I mean, this is bizarre. And I'm going, this can't be real. I mean, this letter cannot be real. They're now policing metaphors and figures of speech. And so that's how crazy things have gotten. But at the same time, it's serious. I mean, they're trying to intimidate, especially Democrats that are speaking out forcefully.
Yeah, and I think that is, I say that it's crazy, and we kind of make a little light of it, but it is serious, because the fact is, your job as a member of Congress is to exercise your full constitutional power, and apparently you were in the middle of a congressional hearing. I'll leave aside, I'm not going to play lawyer for this episode. I'll leave aside, the jurisdiction about what is said in a congressional hearing, but it is. It is part and parcel of an administration right now that, as we are recording this, you have the Chief Justice of the United States having to stand up against calls by the President of the United States to impeach a federal judge simply because the federal judge ruled against him. You have Department of Justice lawyers showing up in federal courthouses saying things that, for one reason or another, end up not being true. And in some instances, most recently, refusing to even answer judges' questions. And I'm just curious, you've been in politics in a number of different roles. What do you, and I'm getting the question a lot as a lawyer, about, are we in a constitutional crisis? Like, how do you see it from your vantage point of, like, where are we? Are we in like partisan skirmishing? Are we in worse than partisan skirmishing, something with like authoritarian overtones? Is it worse than that? Is it a crisis? Like, how do you process it for when your constituents ask you?
I don't see how we can call it anything but a crisis. And I think when you have essentially an authoritarian president who views himself as essentially a king or a monarch, that completely disregards now the courts and our judicial system, an equal branch of government, where he chooses not to follow any of the kind of constitutional mandates as it relates to the checks and balances of the Congress, attacking the courts in the way he is, teaming up essentially with the world's richest man to go through and illegally go through our agencies to essentially discard constitutional protections, attack the way he is federal workers and all of our other institutions, including the media. And I would argue that in many ways they've dominated and now dominate the media Fox News might as well be state television. The way they've completely dominated what's happening online and many of the kind of YouTube online social spaces. They are in complete control, and not just with they as the party. I'm talking about Donald Trump. Donald Trump is the Republican Party, and Elon Musk is his right hand henchman. And so we are in a crisis, and I think oftentimes I hear other colleagues of mine, or and I've only been in Congress for one term, so I'm just starting my second term. I'm a new member. I was mayor of my city before that, but I sometimes don't sense the kind of urgency of the moment. This man is when you lay off half the workforce at the Department of Education, you're setting up that department to fail, so that you can then come in and privatize what's left, sell it off to your billionaire friends, and destroy programs that are actually helping people, mostly low income working class families across this country. When you say that you want to save $3 to $4 trillion, there's no way of doing that than dismantling Medicaid and dismantling the way Social Security works. When you're firing Social Security workers, as they're doing right now, it's to set up the system to fail so that they can come in and privatize off parts of that system. When they're attacking the FAA and firing 400 to 500 safety technicians, when reports just last year said we had to hire 800 more, that is so that Elon Musk can come in, take the contracts, use Starlink, and cause chaos in something that should be safe with numerous checks and balances. I mean, if that isn't a crisis, I don't know what gets worse and where we're at. And this is going to be both chaotic and a slow burn to Donald Trump with complete power over us. And I've said from day one, he has no interest in leaving the presidency. And I think people are fooling themselves if people think he's just joking about that.
I'll be right back with more of my conversation with Congressman Garcia in a moment, but I want to take a second to ask you to subscribe to Democracy Docket's free daily and weekly newsletter. It's a recap of the top democracy news of the day, and it'll be the best thing that you read in your inbox. Subscribe above or in the link below. Yeah, so one of the reasons why I really wanted to have you on is because, as you point out, you have not been in Congress that long and you were a mayor. And my experience having worked with presidents, having worked with senators, members of the House, governors, state legislators, and mayors, AGs, everything is. One of the things about mayors is they are in some ways oftentimes the most practical politicians. And I don't mean that in a pejorative towards everybody else. I love all of your colleagues in Congress and the like. But when you're a mayor, you have to deal with the real day-to-day problems that people face in their lives. And so I feel like sometimes the discussions we have about DOJ or about cutting the government, they have kind of like this big numbers problem, which is like they're just big numbers, right? But you have an interesting vantage point because you were recently a mayor who actually had to solve the problems of real people in your city. So talk about like and now obviously you're in Congress, so you see it from that perspective as well. But talk about like, what does it mean when you have this kinds of disruption and all of a sudden, they just say, well, we're furloughing this number of people. Oh, we've cut this program. Oh, we've fired all the people in this department. Like, how does that make the real lives of people, the real lives of everyday Americans, in Long Beach, California, how does it affect them?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think when you're the mayor, you're every day in the grind, talking to real people, seeing how programs work, and so getting to Congress, these aren't just numbers to me. These are human beings and lives. I want to take one step back to the question you asked. Look, I don't think when people say, "Oh, the Department of Education, they cut half the workforce," that's horrific. It is, but what does it actually mean?
Right.
Take the state of California. This is true in most states. The single largest support for families with students with disabilities. These are students in special programs. Maybe they have a physical disability. Maybe they have a severe mental health need or support that they need. These students are largely funded And the classrooms are largely funded by direct support from the Department of Education. It does not go through the state. It's direct support from the feds. Sometimes if it goes to the state, it might be a pass-through. What ends up happening is if Donald Trump gets his way, they will send resources, less money though, to the states directly for states to decide how to spend this money. In states that choose to do essentially private school choice, or where they send more resources to private schools, many private schools don't have these programs. It's only public schools that actually support these students and families. So in those states, public schools will not receive this funding or very limited funding. So what you're going to end up happening is you're going to have students with disabilities in classrooms immediately seeing the impact. Larger classrooms, less support, less parent support, less technology, less health support for these students. And you're going to see this money go to private schools and more students fleeing to the private sector, making public schools and the demands on public schools even harder. That is the real world impact of cuts to the Department of Education. And it's incredibly serious. The pandemic that just happened. One of the things that infuriates me about RFK Jr., he is a tinfoil hat conspiracy theorist. This is a person that should be nowhere near any government agency, let alone the top of our health agency. This is a man who literally has cost the lives of thousands of people in other countries because of the way he has caused vaccine hesitancy in places around the world and in our own country. We're seeing what's happening in Texas right now with the measles and other diseases. During the pandemic, cities like Long Beach and others, we could not have survived without strong federal support. The vaccines, the National Guard working with our military partners, the Department of Defense doing mass purchasing of tests and COVID because they could do it as large of an agency as they were, bringing in the federal resources to support local health departments. There's a huge role that federal government plays in the things that we do. Health departments, whether it's state departments of health or county or even city departments of health, are largely dependent on health and human services grants. And many of these grants are essentially, they're created and developed to help people that really need the most help, the working poor, people that are homeless. And so these impacts are going to be huge, and they're not going to be felt immediately, but they will be felt in 6 months, a year, 2 years, and beyond. And that's what I think I want people to understand is you may not be impacted today. You are going to be impacted in the next 2 or 3 years.
Talk to me about what's going on in Congress. You know, the thing that has surprised me the most, I have to say, and I don't usually suffer from wild-eyed optimism when it comes to Republicans doing the right thing. But the thing that has surprised me the most is how absolutely obsequious the Republicans in the House have been to Donald Trump's wishes. I mean, you know, normally the House Republicans, and I, by the way, don't usually agree with the direction they want to take this, because oftentimes they want to take it to an extremely, you know, right-wing perspective, but they jealously guard their power to spend, their power to tax. You know, those are like the core, you know, powers that, you know, you would think that the legislative branch would stick up for. And yet, you know, they have essentially, and the speaker himself, by the way, who is like the third in line to the presidency. I mean, this is like historically a very powerful position. He's kind of forfeited all of this to Trump. And I'm just curious, you know, I've gotten conflicting answers on this. One is, well, the Republicans are afraid they'll lose primaries, you know, that they are afraid of him politically. One of your colleagues came on actually this very podcast and said, and I was quite startled by it, that he actually thinks it's that some Republican members are actually physically afraid, that they are afraid that the MAGA, you know, that his supporters, you know, could threaten them. That I suppose another answer is they just agree ideologically and they want to give a new president runway. What do you think of is motivating your Republican colleagues to be in the position they are in right now versus Trump?
I think there's probably some truth in all of that. I think what's most powerful for them is they see the strength of Donald Trump with the base, and you match that with Elon Musk and his ability to essentially fund whatever he wants, the biggest spender now in American politics in this last cycle.
Mhm.
It's an incredibly powerful and dangerous combination. Um, Donald Trump basically will do whatever it takes to get whatever he wants. And separate of maybe one member, Representative Massey, he can call any Republican and tell them how to vote, and they'll do it because they're afraid of Donald Trump in the primary. They're afraid of the MAGA base that supports Donald Trump blindly. I mean, it's for all intents and purposes, much of it is cultish, as we know. And then now you have Elon Musk, and Elon Musk is what he has spent so far is nothing to him. He
Hmm.
could change single-handedly the way our political system works by injecting himself. Essentially, Donald Trump says, we're going to primary this person. And Elon Musk says, okay, great. Well, I'm going to spend $20 million on that primary and support the guy that Donald Trump wants. And that is a very powerful and dangerous combination. And so I think we have to be very aware that Republicans are very fearful of losing power and trying to, connect with their constituents because they know that Elon Musk and Donald Trump are quite popular and better known and have bigger microphones and more money than they could ever hope to have. And so that's concerning. Democrats should also be concerned. And that's why I think this is, we at this moment, we have to think beyond like this next political election and think like we have to be guided by the right thing to do, because standing up to Elon Musk could very well cost you your seat, could very well damage, your reputation. They can go after you in court, as we saw with Ed Martin. They're going to go, when you have a U.S. attorney using his power to go after you for using metaphors and figures of speech. I mean, these are really all concerning developments. And so back to, are we in a constitutional crisis? I don't, we are. We are in a
Yeah.
very dangerous moment. And what I've told Democrats that have a lot more experience than me and have been in Congress a lot longer, I've said, look, I haven't been here very long, but we could be at the start of a major realignment in American politics. We could be,
Hmm.
a lot of folks are saying, oh, whenever the president's in power, we're going to win the Congress in 2 years. I hope to God that's true. And I'm going to work every single day to make sure that we win the majority in 2026.
Okay, so just so everyone understands who may not be in the weeds on this, there are elections that are sort of, the economy's good, the economy's bad, someone's popular, they're not popular. When the congressman talks about a realignment, there are also periods, sometimes it's one election, sometimes it's a broader period of time, when you literally start to see shifts in populations or geographies. And so all of a sudden you'll see a group that is historically Republican start to be historically Democratic, or vice versa, or states that have been reliably red become reliably blue, or vice versa. So what you're saying, Congressman, I want you to expand on this now, is that you think we may be in the beginning of a realignment. We are we are in a realignment. Like what is say, make your point more, offer more detail to that point.
Yeah, no, look, I hope we're not. I mean, obviously, I don't know that we're at the beginning, but I think we have to consider that we could be. And that is, I think, what's more concerning. And the reason why it's concerning and why we should work like hell to win the next election is because the difference between where we are today and maybe where we were the last time we had a big presidential midterm election is the change in the media landscape and how people consume their information,
Right.
and the disinformation. We are in the disinformation age, where a lot of the information that we're getting is essentially untrue. It's generated. It is AI. It could be essentially purposely fed to us through whatever algorithm Elon Musk controls, or other billionaires. So we're getting misinformation. We're not actually getting information that is actually true. We know that trust in the media is at an all-time low. I mean, look, for a lot of us, when you open the paper, you're reading the New York Times, or back home, I'm reading the LA Times, or whatever news site it is. You rely that is actually accurate information. I mean, it's not, they don't get it right 100% of the time, but they're going to get it right most of the time, vast majority of the time. The trust in those institutional agencies, in their institutions, media organizations are gone, and we're being replaced by these platforms that Charlie Kirk and that Ben Shapiro and others have, tied with the algorithms that were being fed by people like Elon Musk. I think that gives more strength to a realignment where it's harder to fight back against misinformation. So, I'm not trying to be negative. I hope that we're not. We got to fight to ensure that we don't slide backwards, but we have to consider that there are major changes happening in this country because of misinformation, and we've got to take those on. That's why this moment, we should not be sitting back like everything is, going to get better. We got to fight every single day. And I think it's disappointing when I see others, particularly what just happened with the Senate, not have that same fight.
So I'm curious because you mentioned the shifting media landscape, and there has been a shifting media landscape. I mean, honestly, the media landscape has shifted even dramatically since the election, since November. I mean, which was only a few months ago, but it has moved very, very fast. We have seen a lot of the large institutions. The LA Times, you mentioned being a good example, the Washington Post here in Washington, D.C., another, where you have essentially billionaire owners who have decided to take what are really just tremendous brands in the, trusted media space and really, do enormous damage to them. And so we've seen that recently, but we've also seen technology. We've seen the rise of social media. We've seen the rise of disinformation online that has nothing to do with those large institutions. So I think we've seen it from all different perspectives. I'm curious, again, you've been in politics now a while, and, you run, at a very local level where I assume accurate information can be the difference between kids getting to school or not getting to school, families having enough to eat or not having enough to eat. What do you do in the, when there's a heat wave or a natural disaster, right? Where the kinds of accurate information is critical to a mayor. And now in a member of Congress where the information is also critical, but it's at a different level, it's a different scope and probably harder in some respects, I assume. But talk to me a little bit more about what you have seen as the evolution of that media landscape, and kind of what you take away as the prescriptions for Democrats, for elected officials generally, but Democrats, like how to deal with these changes.
First, I think Donald Trump changed everything. And I think,
okay.
Look, obviously Fox was already growing in popularity, and there was already a media landscape that was out there. I think what Donald Trump effectively has done in his campaigns and certainly during his first presidency is he made a huge chunk of our country dramatically lower their trust in traditional media. And that has caused enormous harm to institutions that have been long trusted by everyone, but by most folks to provide us with accurate information. And by damaging the trust we had in our institutional players, he's caused openings for all of these new kind of disinformation machines, or perhaps smaller, non-larger media organizations that maybe don't have the resources to fact check all the time, but then promote all this misinformation online that people are finding. And so Donald Trump's attacks on the media have worked. I mean, they've been very successful. And then he's created openings as president before to go on to these kind of fringe spaces, uplift conspiracy theories, and create mass chaos within the media space. And so now it's hard to know where to depend and get information. And look, and if you are essentially, I would call yourself a more educated person, or someone that looks and tries to educate themselves with accurate information. And for those of us that are active readers, for example, of the Washington Post, I trust the Washington Post less today.
Right. So do I.
Than I did 6 months ago. And that is a shame.
That's a while. It's actually why. If you had told me 6 months ago that you and I would have this conversation, I'd say no way.
Absolutely. And I think it's so sad and dangerous, again, that the Washington Post is now trusted less by folks that have long believed in the power of independent media and the power of an organization like the Washington Post. And so it's all part of Donald Trump's master plan to get us all to distrust the media and to just believe whatever he wants to tell us, and his MAGA base directly. And it is the thing about Donald Trump. And look, I don't think Donald Trump's he doesn't strike me as an overly intelligent person that is,
the only thing that Donald Trump ever said that I believed is when Project 2025 came out, he said, I haven't read it. And I thought, okay, I believe that because you see, this guy has not read 900 pages in his entire life. He definitely didn't read it all in one document.
That's
No,
a,
I don't think. Yeah, I think it's not an overstatement to say he's not an overly intelligent guy.
no, I think that's right. And but what he is, and I think we have to give, and this is where I think we mistake like our thinking. Oh well, he's not an intellectually curious person. That might be true, but he is a master at communication,
Mhm.
and he's a
Yeah,
master at controlling media and the moments and creating a an image and a brand. And we have failed to match and to fight and to call attention to that in spaces where we need to be in. It's which is why I love what Mark, what you're doing here, and what other folks are doing and trying to get information out to uh, more progressive audiences is so critical at this moment, because we can't just depend on what is written in the New York Times anymore, because it's people aren't going to consume it, or what's on cable TV. That's just not going to do it anymore. We've got to be more aggressive.
yeah. So I want to ask you a couple of more sort of personal questions in a sense. The first is, I'm not from California. I'm from the East Coast, but I have to say, the way that your Republican colleagues have treated California strikes me as especially abysmal. I mean, the state of California contributes more money in taxes to the federal government year after year after year. You all have been, frankly, the creative, whether it's Southern California and the entertainment industry, whether it's Northern California and tech, you all have been the developer of much of American culture, of much of American technology. Elon Musk would not be Elon Musk without California. And yet, it feels to me like, when California had a natural disaster, you immediately saw Republicans act like they were being asked to do charity. And I don't know. I found it actually, like I said, and I have no particular connection to California. I just found it very disorienting.
It's and shameful. We've never conditioned disaster relief
No.
ever, including this last round of horrific hurricanes and storms that we had that hit a lot of the East and the South. And now they want to condition aid to California and to the fires here in LA County. Totally shameful and wrong. And I think that it is clearly Donald Trump, again, his attempt to reshape the government and do whatever the
So
hell
you think it's him? That's interesting. So you think it's Trump? You don't think it's the masses or I don't mean to pick on masses specifically,
Yeah.
but the
Like
cost,
freedom,
the people who,
yeah,
yeah, the freedom.
yeah, I think it's both. But I mean, Donald Trump is verbalizing it, right? He likes to say, "Oh, California, needs to do needs to do or fix their water issue, or Governor Newsom shouldn't say this, or if they've been doing forest management the right way." I mean, he also puts a lot of conditions and says a lot of negative things in moments of disaster, which is it's shameful, and hopefully we can get past the wildfire relief debate. I think the money should be sent here. There should be no conditions on it. And the next time there's a
Absolutely.
natural disaster somewhere else, that money should go directly without conditions, and that's just the way it should be, separate of politics.
Absolutely. Last question I have for you. You are here in Washington D.C. You help govern the country. You are a very, very vocal supporter of the fight for democracy, which is again one of the reasons I wanted to have you on. You're one of the champions, frankly, in the House on issues of democracy. You are fearless in standing up to Donald Trump, which I love. But when you're back home, I'm sure you have a lot of constituents who come up to you and just say they're worried. They're not, they don't know what to do. They see the price of groceries go up. They have seen the wildfires and the federal government not sending money. They have seen Donald Trump threaten and threaten and threaten. You mentioned what it would mean to, parents and children with disabilities. They see all of this and they're just terrified. They're just terrified.
Sure.
And so what do you tell them? Do you offer them hope? What is the thing that you tell them that they should do?
I mean, two things. are happening when I come home. One is and I've shared this with colleagues in the House. Overwhelmingly, people are stopping me wherever I go, supermarket, I'm at the post office and visiting a school, and they're saying, "Thank you for fighting hard. Thank you for calling Elon Musk out. Thank you for being aggressive. Keep it up." Like there's no question that people want us to fight really hard and to match kind of that energy that the Republicans are employing. And I've gone out of my way to do everything possible to be disruptive to what Donald Trump and Elon Musk are trying to do, and I feel very supported back home with that. Then the second piece is I'm very honest with folks. I'm like, look, we're in a very serious moment, but their actions can make an impact. And I've told them, the example I use, for example, is the federal grants. I mean, day one, Donald Trump says, we're going to stop all these federal grants, all these nonprofits across the country. Executive order, they're done. People got angry all across our community. I had 500 nonprofits on a Zoom call the next day. People organized, they wrote letters, they called Republican offices. And within a few days, Donald Trump had to reverse that, even separate of the court order and the court process, because of the public pressure. Look at what's going on right now in the courts. We're actually winning cases. Now, Donald Trump tried to defy some of these. There'll be appeals, but we are winning some cases. They're having to hire back tens of thousands of federal employees that DOJ cut because the public said no, and our friends in the legal community are pushing back, and organizations are stepping up to push back. So we actually, when we are angry and are in the street, look what's happening to Tesla. Now, look, no one condones, obviously, any sort of violence or destruction on some of that that's going on. But on the peaceful protests that people are having, it's having an impact, right? People are saying the person at the top of this company is damaging this brand, and this brand is being associated now with the MAGA far right. And so all of these things are actually having an impact. So I encourage people to continue to stand up, fight back, scream and yell, peacefully protest, and bring attention to the issues. We got to keep it up. It is going to make a difference, and it's already making a difference.
Well, Congressman Robert Garcia, you have been one of the strongest fighters. It's like I said, it's part of why I wanted to have you on, is because, I like to think I'm effective, but no one will tell you that I don't fight, and I don't fight hard. That is what Steve Bannon hates about me. It's what Donald Trump, it's why Donald Trump, has called me out as recently as his speech at the Department of Justice, because he knows that I will never stop fighting for democracy. And that is true about you. You are a fighter in what is really the challenge of our generation. I mean, I am sure that you would rather have come to Congress and be able to tackle any number of other problems. You didn't pick the fight for democracy as the challenge of our time, but that is the challenge we have, and you have become a leader in that. And I want to thank you for everything you've done in Congress. I want to thank you for everything you've done, frankly, not just in your own district, but around the country. And thank you for being here today.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And thanks for everything you do. I mean, I'm obviously a huge fan of all your work, and keep it up.
Thanks for watching this episode of Defending Democracy. Please make sure you're subscribed to Democracy Docket's free daily and weekly newsletters. We'll see you next time.